Hello again. So, my goal with these lessons is to kind of bunch them up together, and after I show you two or three in a row, I want to do a concept for myself, the way I would be doing it, and show how these tips and these little tricks come into play on concepts with higher detail or a higher level of finish than just the demos. So for this one, I thought I'd have a little fun and do a mech torso. I didn't want to do a whole mech because that would take a while. So just really quick, so we know what we're looking at. This is kind of the chest here, and the shoulders. He's missing a head right now, which you'll see in a bit. Maybe give him some ears. The shoulder joint. There's a big hole. A circular hole on the side here, and the shoulder would probably come out here, and his arm would come down next to his body here. Hi, I've got fingers. So that's what we're looking at. It's just a chest of a big giant robot. As you can see, I'm starting out pretty simple. By the way, the robot's already done, and I'm kind of going through the steps that I saved along the way that I think are good kind of checkpoints. So, as you can see, the shapes are simple, and I'm not giving myself too much detail to worry about in the beginning. This is kind of his waist down here and his kind of groin, hip, crotch area. I end up deleting that later, so don't worry about that. But for example, his chest is it's kind of a tapered cube right now, and it just sticks out in the front like this, pretty simple stuff, generally speaking. I did cut into it once, I think, and make it so that the shape has a bit of a second taper, so I kind of form a facet right there, just so that this top shape is not so simple that it's just one tapered square. The big form on the side of the shoulder really is fairly simple, even though there's some detail on it now. The shape could be considered a square with some parts cut out of it. Now, I know that sounds maybe overly simple, but let me explain. So if here's the profile from the side, I don't like this blue, I don't know why, here we go. I knew that I kind of just wanted a big mass next to his chest, and I didn't start, to be honest, I didn't start with a big cube or a big square, extruded square, because I've been doing this a little while, and I felt comfortable kind of jumping in and trying to get to a little more complicated shape right away. But keep losing my colors. But with that said, what you can see here is there's a top and a slanted angle here and a slanted angle down the bottom, so that this smaller facet sort of sticks forward up here. So from the side, if this is the front, really I just cut this corner, I cut the bottom one, and now I have this shape with a hole in the middle, and this goes in, to make room for the shoulder joint. So here's the top, and I actually made it circular down here, and all that is really is just I'm echoing the circle I started with in the beginning. And that kind of decision comes, after I make the first simple decision of having a circle in the middle. So that the first decision is really, really simple. I just know that his arm is going to come out of a circle and I'm going to go from there. I'm going to build from there. So down here, in order to make this, whole profile a little more interesting, I just cue off of this circle I already have and use it to affect the profile of the shape, right? So, and back here, I basically just kind of subtract this corner here. So with a little bit of simple kind of carving and subtraction, I'm left with the shape I have in the concept. So, moving on. From here, I felt decent that I felt that I had a decent start, and the forms were all in the right place. So I start to kind of cut in a little bit and add more detail. And the new layer looks like this. So I'll talk a little bit about what I did. The first thing I started doing was just adding some simple shapes in on top to kind of, get away from the really, really simplified shapes. For example, I just added a couple little cylinders up here. I added a cylinder out here thinking, hey, I might elaborate on this exposed shoulder joint. Let me kind of get that started. I know that this circle is a ring meant to rotate the stuff inside of it. So I added a few concentric seams and a little more detail. Up here on the front, I cut in on the side of the shape so that these points come to these parts come to a bit of a taper here. And I also added it was a little too square and too straightforward, so I added a little circle and I curved the edge of the shape around it and went from there. So now, and then I use the subdivision trick to kind of add some seams and cut in. So now I have this cool new kind of shape here at the front. You can see the same thing on the other side. Just slowly, I'm making simple choices, simple steps in order to break down the shapes a bit, in order to make them a little more complicated. I realized there was something I didn't quite like, and I think it's that it was this big triangle. It was these sharp, triangular kind of shapes that I feel like maybe I've seen before. Maybe, I don't know, just wasn't doing it for me at the time. And I felt like I have a big circle that I like the circle. I kind of like these curves I was making by adding cylinders. And I thought, let me augment this shape a bit because it's not doing it for me. So this is a little bit outside of the lessons we covered, but I want to show it anyway. Don't be intimidated or overwhelmed because this is just sort of a step towards refinement. It's taking the big shapes I already have and kind of bringing them together. And I'll talk a lot more about this in later lessons. Homogenizing your design, picking a shape language and sticking with it, etc., etc., etc. So I'm not going to go too far into the frame of mind I'm in, but I'm just going to explain what I did. As I said, I was sort of starting to like these curves and these circular kind of this feeling. I didn't like the points on the front, so I curved this part here and I curved that part here. I kept what I had elsewhere, and so I was left with this sort of shape that I really like, and I thought, let me take that over to the chest. So I angled this, I kind of redrew the entire section. So I angled it down, but then I just shot it out forward, brought it straight down. I'm rounding the corners a lot because I start to like that nice round feeling. So that's another kind of topic, but I'll just keep going. And I brought it back and tried to kind of complete it. In the middle here, I'm thinking, you know, this big shape, it's too simple. So let me put in a subdivision on the side here where I know it's going to kind of feel nice to have one, and we'll go from there. And I liked the feeling of it, so I went forward. Now, it felt too weird without a head, so I had to give him a head. There it is. I told you I was going to get rid of the waist. Now, there's that new chest, much simpler, and the head is a little more figured out too. So now I feel there's a lot of reasons I like it like this. As I said, I'll get into some of that stuff about form language a little later. Let's talk about this big chest shape. You know, from the side, it pretty much looks like this. Okay, now you might be thinking, oh great, you know, draw a cool shape, and that's, you know, it's easy, why not? You're designing robots, no problem. But if you slow down and you think about it, you know, I knew I wanted a rectangular extrusion to come forward, right? That's the simplest way I can think of it. If I'm just extruding, you know, a rectangle, here's his head, and I'm just extruding this out, right? First, I have this big shape to work with. Now I can just start cutting in. Boom, you know, boom, boom. Let's just say those are my cuts, right? And as I talked about before, instead of just leaving now this new shape like this, I'm going to, because I like this rounded, soft feeling, in my mind, I'm sort of gonna chamfer and round these edges. This one actually comes down a bit, so I'm rounding this edge, right? And now I'm connecting them. You might remember this from the 3D demo. Rounding this edge. This is just one trick. It's one stylistic kind of approach where instead of leaving, you know, I want to be really, really clear that instead of just leaving the edge completely, you know, sharp, I'm softening it and blending between the two angles so I get a curve. That's all it is. I just happen to be doing it on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 corners, so that now the final shape looks a little more complicated and detailed. But if you can kind of break down the subdivisions of the whole thing, sorry, I got a new tablet and it likes to leave the selections on for me. So I can't draw. When you think of just the whole thing, you know, first, you know, just this simple mass first starts to get a little easy. And you kind of do the same thing over here. Think about how to break this complicated shape down into a simple one, or excuse me, yeah, how to break up a simple shape into a more complicated one slowly but surely. You start to get somewhere, especially if you put them next to each other, right? Boom. Now we're kind of, you know, we're starting to stack these simple steps up into more complicated results. Just for the sake of argument, let's do that again. So the head here has, it's basically, one of the parts of the head is a rectangular form. It's a rectangular shape. Boom. In space. One of the most simple shapes you can make, right? Now, see if I can do this so it's easy to read. just for the sake of making my point again. Because sometimes I'll watch videos and someone will say something, an artist will explain a really cool idea, and he'll do it in his, on one, he or she will do it on one example, and I think, okay, whoa, okay, wait, what happened? So I want to do this a couple times to hopefully let it sink in. Now, there is another shape here extruding out from the side of it. Let's ignore that shape, right? Let's break this down into simple parts. In fact, let me just erase it for simplicity's sake. Oops. Okay, we just have this one kind of hunk we're dealing with, hunk of tech. So I have a rectangle. I add a little cylinder on the back. You know, the outline is too simple. I want to add some form. I stick a cylinder out the back. Right, it's back here on the other one. I put a circle in the front because it kind of feels like a camera or a sensor or maybe a laser. I don't know what it is, but it feels right to have it on the front. So I just slap it on there. I want a circle right here. Right here is the front face, right? Now look, subdividing up just a little bit to make this shape more interesting. Look at what I did naturally on the third lines, 1 and 2, right? Here is my front face. Pardon my horrible perspective. Not completely even, mostly even. I have, you know, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, right? Easy, even breakup. I do thirds all the time without even realizing it. Now, I'm not drawing those thirds everywhere. I'm just using them as a subdivision, as a reference point for subdivision. Okay? Down here, I actually do use it to add lines. Okay? Up here, I don't, but I place it. I use the line as an axis for my circle. Now, again, forgive me if this seems sort of obtuse or overly thought, but again, this is a more essential level, more beginning level kind of idea where I'm not saying you have to do things just like this, but I really want to strip away any mystery so that if you're new to this kind of frame of mind, or if you're new to trying to design things like this, I'm giving you some very, very simple ways to look at things so that you're not intimidated and you're not afraid to jump in. You at least have something to work with and start the process. Okay, now that disclaimer's over, down here I subdivide a bit more for some, detail ratio. I think I just cut this in half, and so on and so forth, right? So underneath is my shape. I think I rounded this corner out, brought it forward like that, because it's, again, too simple. Simple, I have a straight corner, I round it out. Back here, there is, I cut some seams and I add some detail with what? Easy subdivision. I'm not going to do the measurements and show you what line it's on, but looks like a fifth to me, whatever. I cut down here to open up the corner. There's some plates. I don't know what it is yet. I extend the opening over to a circular shape. And boom, I leave it because that's enough detail for me, right? So there's a lot of other things that go into this, like what scale is my object? What is the actual object I'm designing? Is it real world? Is it fake? Is it, what kind of design language should it have? but don't worry about all that. It's coming in later lessons. I just want to take some of these mechanical shapes and really break them down to their most basic elements, so that in case you're looking at them and thinking, how do you do that? I want to take some of that mystery away. This sketch turns into this after some cleaning up. Okay, you might be thinking, that was kind of a big jump, Joe. This drawing looks pretty detailed to me. And you're right, but I think I can point out how this is a lot of simple steps added up with each other. So let me run through this, try and run through this quickly, and we can talk about how I'm using the same techniques. So for example, on the side here, I'm thinking, between the shapes, between these big masses, it might be nice to see some exposed machinery. So I decide, okay, let me cut away into this so we can see some of the insides. And I do that right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, I just round the edges, the corners, to match the rest of the object. So I make a big cut here, and I think to myself, okay, I'm peeling away the surface, the plating or the skin of the object, of the machine. And now we get to see, the fun inner mechanisms inside. And I did one of the easiest tricks that I know, which is the first shape I made, I just follow the cut line. Let me grab another color here. I followed the cut line and use that to show some of the framing, which I colored in orange there, right? And honestly, after that, it's really just a bunch of small sort of high frequency detail that helps make it look, sort of high fidelity rather. So that's how I got there. After I made that cut, it's just a simple step to fill it in. Up here, I thought that on the front here, I thought this shape was getting very simple, so I wanted to add on something to break it up just a bit and help show the scale. So I just stuck sort of an extended cylinder into it. So let's just say this shape is sitting on top, and it's just inserted into the within the surface, and so it would intersect here, and you don't see that part. Okay, then in my mind, I forget how, if I drew it first or if I did this later, but I just extend it, the front of it back. I lean it back so it's at an angle. Again, the quick trick was that I used it to match those angles, so that maybe from the side the shape kind of flows a bit. But shape language and all that stuff, I'm going to talk about it later. So here I have this really elemental shape added, and what do? I use some subdivision to add the seams. I'm using subdivision to add this big seam, and then I sort of come back in a second time to add some detail on top of it, right? Well, once I have this big seam to work with, that's really just all I'm going on. In the sketch, this is a big black line, just like this. But as I'm refining and as I'm clarifying, I can come in here, I subtract a block and sort of show a little bit of what's underneath it. But it first starts with finding where I want to put that seam. Boom, easy line across the surface. As I start subdividing, I just use more tricks. I keep using my tricks to add detail on top of that. Really quick, on the shoulder here, this extrusion comes to mind on the front facing sort of slant, or the angle here. It needed a little more detail in the form, so I added a cube right here resting on an angle, and it looked a little too simple like that, I think, in the sketch or as I was figuring it out. So I tapered the cube down like this so it would kind of flow with the rest of the angles. With this much high frequency detail and get overwhelmed, but if you start to break down each shape on its own, it doesn't have to be that complicated. So with that said, I think I'll leave it there. I hope all these tips have made sense all the way through to this refined line drawing, and you kind of feel like you can look at something this detailed and not be too overwhelmed or think it's out of reach, and that hopefully when you add them all together, these tips kind of you can start thinking about how to add them, or you can start thinking about how they can work together in succession also, especially to get to this last final level of detail. Hope you liked it. Hope you got something from it. Hope you're feeling ready to attack some complicated shapes without any fear, and without thinking that it's a magical process that you can't do. I'm telling you, if you break anything down into its parts, it's easy to digest. So thanks for checking out this first chunk of the Essential series. I really appreciate your support, and as always, I'm completely open to requests, recommendations. If there's anything you did or didn't like about the video, by all means let me know. I'm all ears, because I'm going to be doing more of these, and we are going to go up into the intermediate and advanced levels. Before that, though, there will be more of this series, the Essentials or Novice series. And I've already got some of those planned out, including tricks for creating surface detail, and also how to think about the inside of the machine and what it looks like when you peel off the skin. All right, with that said, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks once again, and I'll catch you next time.